Welcome to God Pods, faith conversations from Boston College's Church in the 21st Century Center. Welcome to God Pods. This conversation was recorded in partnership with the Roach Center for Catholic Education to celebrate the Angels Unaware sculpture at Boston College during the month of November 2020. It features insights from Canadian artist Timothy Schmalz, whose commissioned sculpture was originally installed in St. Peter's Square in Rome on September 29, 2019, for the 105th World Day of Refugees and Migrants.
Welcome, everyone. I think as you're joining, we have just been diving into some conversation already. I know more people are going to be joining us here momentarily, so we'll get started in a second. But thanks for taking your evening to be with us and to converse a little bit with these wonderful artists tonight. So we'll get started in a second because I see more and more people joining. So Gina is the angel from the facilities team that kind of helped to lead and coordinated all the cranes and the trucks. So she's on because she got so drawn into this project, and many others I see too. Grace and Jake and Kara and Liz and Marcia. Welcome. Mark and Nancy. Awesome. This is great. We have a wonderful group of people from all over calling in. So I definitely want to begin on time and maximize our time together with Timothy and Patricia and Sheila. So welcome everyone to our first panel lecture with our Angels Unawares sculpture here at Boston College. It will be here for the entire month of November. We're very blessed to have it be the first official stop in the national tour. And it will go across the country and return to its home at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., where it will be permanently placed. And they're at the process of building a beautiful park, probably as we speak, for it to reside. But I'm excited to be to welcome this evening on this All Souls Day, which is a very significant day in the Catholic Church in terms of really recognizing and honoring those who have gone before us. And I think that's very significant to start our tour on this holy day, given that so many people die in passage as they search for a better life, a more dignified life. So just pause for a moment and kind of think about those individuals, and especially as you gaze at the sculpture, if you're here at Boston College, to think about maybe those individuals who have passed in that journey. And so tonight I want to begin just by recognizing those individuals. And I think to begin this conversation around the artistic expression of social justice. And so we're very blessed to be joined here this evening by Timothy Schmalz, amazing Canadian artist who has been sculpting for 25 years or so. And you can see he's joining us in his studio tonight, where he'll have an opportunity to share with us a bit about the work that he does and some of the pieces, including Angels Unawares, which hopefully you haven't had an opportunity to see on campus. And we also are joined by Professor Patricia Riggin, who is the Associate Professor of the Practice of Theater in the Theater Department, and she is in the Rob Sham Theater tonight. Coming in, she's been at Boston College since 2001 and has expertise in theater in New York City, where she taught, and she's directed numerous productions here at Boston College. And we're also joined by Professor Sheila Gallagher, Associate Professor of Studio Art, and she is an interdisciplinary artist. And you can see from her background some more contemporary work. She's known for her inventive exploration of materials, and she works in many media, including video, smoke, drawing, animation, live flowers, and light projection. So we are blessed to have these amazing artists for this conversation this evening tonight. And we're going to begin by allowing Tim to share with us a little bit about Angels Unawares and how it came to be and the story of that beautiful sculpture that's on our campus for this month of November. So Tim, or Timmy, as he likes to be called, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, the Angels Unawares sculpture was an absolute honor and an amazing experience to actually create. I think the beginning of the story starts out with my Matthew 25 series. I think for around 7 years, I was working on kind of visually translating one of my favorite passages in the Gospels, and that's Matthew 25, where Christ identifies with the least in our society. And so when I was working on these projects, I've been sculpting Christian sculptures for probably more than 30 years, actually. And what I found when I started to work on Matthew 25, I really realized that there was so much in the Gospels and in Scripture that has never before been actually sculpted, and that really was very exciting to me to see some of these texts like Matthew 25 and have the opportunity to almost visually translate this text. And so I created a sculpture that was actually a representation of Jesus on a park bench, totally shrouded with clothes or a blanket or a sleeping bag or something like that. And so the only way that you could identify it as Jesus is through the pulled up blanket at the feet area where you can see the wounds of being on the cross. And I thought that this was an amazing representation of almost line for line that scripture, because within it there's this kind of this eureka moment. There's this ambiguity at the beginning of who is being referred to here, and then at the last moment it comes in with, whenever you've done this to the least of my brothers and sisters, you've done it to me. And so like that, the sculpture takes on that kind of theatrical sequential understanding. When you look at it from a distance, you actually think it's a real homeless person. And when you get closer up to it, then you, and only when you get really close up to it, do you notice that it is actually a sculpture of Jesus with the wounds in the feet. And this sculpture and my other ones of the series of Matthew 25 were installed in some of the most historical places in Rome, including the Papal Charities building inside the Vatican, and also St. Paul's outside the walls. And so I've created these new bronze works in Rome, and that created quite a bit of attention. I met with Cardinal Czerny, who was very familiar with these works, and he suggested that I do a new sculpture on the theme of refugees and migrants. And so I suggested to him that a lot of my sculptures could be appropriate for that subject matter. And he said, no, I want a new sculpture. So I actually came back to my studio and in Canada from Rome, and I sat down, and I think it was 3 days later, the whole idea just unfolded to me. I usually, when I sculpt, I listen to the Bible obsessively, nonstop for like 4 years, hoping that some of that will just sink right in. And one passage, Hebrews 13:2, I remember it must have been the 100th time I actually listened to it, but I just really felt it this one time. And I thought, oh my God, be welcoming to strangers. Many have entertained angels unawares. It just hit me that this is one of the most beautiful passages of scripture. So I at lunchtime, I went in and I Googled that passage and Hebrews 13:2, and I was thinking there must be 1,000 different representations of art on it. And really all I found was the text on coffee mugs and t-shirts. And I thought, this is perfect. Christian artwork, there's so much more to do on it. So I started for about a year working on the idea of how can I interpret and represent Hebrews 13:2 with sculpture. And so I do a lot of experiments, little small models, sketches, and everything like that. But when I came back from Rome, what was on my mind was the idea of migrants, refugees, immigrants. And then it's almost like the idea came from the ceiling right into my heart. The idea was just done. I could see it in my mind. It was a raft with a crowd of migrants from all historical periods, all parts of the world. And in the center of this crowd, you have an angel, but you can only see the wings because of the crowd. So then the wings actually almost suggest symbolically that they're everyone's wings, to suggest that they're all kind of spiritual beings, and they're all sacred. And so that was like, it was just like, oh my God, I did a couple sketches of it. I was so happy with how the sketch looked. I thought, is it a raft or a boat? I thought, it doesn't really matter. Let's just start working on it. So I started to create a model of it. And I sent emails of it to Cardinal Czerny as I was progressing on it. I wasn't very close to being done it, but he sent it to, he showed it to Pope Francis, and Pope Francis suggested that he would be delighted if I bring the model over to Rome so he can bless it. And I'm not even done the model yet. So I'm like, oh my God, this is exciting. So I finished the model. Actually, this is a small model here. That's how my models look. They're kind of rough. But then you can see the big one is here, right? But the model is where you kind of get the general idea about what's going on. So that's how the project started. And it wasn't soon after the blessing of the model that I got probably the best email of my life. And that was that the work is desired to be created life-size and installed in St. Peter's Square. Whoops, sorry. And so then I had an epic challenge in front of me to take that little model and bring life to each and every one of those figures. And so the composition of the sculpture, it's very similar to this one that I'm working on right now, but the composition of the sculpture, what I wanted to do was kind of give kind of a visual representation to that idea that I think we all grew up with in North America, and that's we all came from somewhere else. We're all kind of immigrants. And and actually I thought about Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech just recently, where he said, we all came from different ships, but we're on the same boat now. And I really wanted to sculpt that. I wanted to kind of give faces. I wanted to give emotion to that reality. And I wanted to do it in a way that it wasn't just like a symbolic cliche. And I knew in order to do that, I couldn't just have 3 or 4 people. I couldn't, to make the sculpture, to make be welcoming to strangers, many have entertained angels unawares, Hebrews 13. To make that subtle, I had to make it huge. I had to make it that when you approach the piece, the angel is not right in your face, but it's something that kind of unfolds to you. And I also wanted to have representation of all different races, all religions, and I wanted to make it seem natural. And how I achieved that, I had to put more than one British European in. I had to put 5 or 6 Asians in. I had to put more than a half a dozen Africans in. I had to make it seem real. I had to make it like a tapestry too. So at any angle that you approach the sculpture, you would benefit, whatever position you're at, you would benefit from the idea that it's a shared experience. So I'd have the Jew right beside the Muslim, I'd have the African right beside the European. And so people can taste that with their eyes. They can kind of understand it visually. And I think that was really important. And so by creating the sculpture, what I did was the faces, I actually took old photographs actually from archives from Ellis Island up to having current day refugees in Canada modeling in my studio. So it was really a tapestry. It was really an amazing experience. But also what it allowed me to do is get deeper into the emotions too. With more than 100 faces, I had the opportunity to imagine and to press in my sculpture all the different emotions that one must have leaving their own home and going to a brand new place, the sorrow, the loss, but also sometimes the happiness and the hope. And so the sculpture is really, it was awesome to do it. It was a big project. It took me 7 months where I was in my studio here working nonstop. I had a very important deadline. I knew that it was going to be, the date was set probably a year backed up. So I knew that I had to get everything done for this dedication where it was going to be unveiled to Pope Francis, where there was going to be around 50,000 people. I couldn't not work on it. I had to stop everything in my life to make sure it was clear for that deadline. And it was a fascinating experience. And throughout the process, I began to understand kind of the idea about the benefit of new artwork. In Rome, you kind of sometimes feel that it's a museum, and I oftentimes think that can have a disadvantage where they think that the Christian ideas should belong into a museum as well. And I think just the act of adding new sculptures, Christian sculptures today, the year 2020, has the benefit of suggesting that our faith is relevant today. When you're in Rome and you see all those beautiful marble sculptures, they look like melting ice cream cones. It just makes me cringe sometimes when you see these beautiful masterpieces outside slowly dissolving over the centuries, right? And so the idea of placing a new sculpture, it really has just that alone has a powerful statement. And I think that the best comment that the sculpture received was a couple days after it was installed in St. Peter's Square. There were journalists that went up to Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, who's very close to Pope Francis, and they interviewed Cardinal Konrad about the piece. And one of them said, well, it doesn't match the Bernini. And he said, it doesn't matter if it matches the Bernini. Bernini's the artist that did the colonnade and the statues around. Cardinal Konrad said, it doesn't matter if it matches Bernini, it matches the Gospels. And I thought, yes, that's the best compliment this sculpture had, because I think that's the best compliment any Christian artwork can have. Oftentimes, I kind of imagine my sculpture just being a skin that covers that scriptural text and those eternal truths. And the thinner that membrane is, which is my artwork, the more hopefully transparent that text and those eternal truths will be visible. And so I think that's the challenge of a Christian sculptor is to do your best to express that text and that truth and that idea that is oftentimes hidden in a closed Bible. And so the great thing about big sculptures is they're hard to close, and they're always open in a sense visually. And so what I like to think is that if someone benefits and understands and feels welcome by looking at the angels unawares, it's done its job. And it was fascinating because, you know, it's an interesting time that the Angels Unawares has come to Boston. I don't think there's ever been a time in the history of America that sculptures have been under the spotlight more than now. And I think what that shows me, the positive thing, what it shows me is that artwork matters. It has a big impact to the people surrounding it. I thought most of those statues were invisible, and it's interesting to see that the sensitivity that people have towards sculptures. And I also think that the Christianity, one of the benefits of being a sculptor that's alive is I can create new sculptures today. And actually this past Easter, usually during Easter, my ritual for more than 20 years has been locking myself in my studio and creating a new sculpture of Jesus. And this Easter, I did a African-American nativity. And it was really interesting. And that's part of a campaign I've been working on over the last years to put different races within my Christian sculptures, and not as a secondary figure, but as the frontal figure. In fact, 2 years ago, I just created an amazing African-American corpus for Cardinal Gregory and when he was in Atlanta. And that kind of understanding or that sensitivity for me came about with my Homeless Jesus that has been installed in so many places around the world. A couple unveilings of the piece are really touching to me. When I was actually in Detroit, a young African-American homeless girl came up to me, and she was just so moved by that sculpture. And it's been installed at many different places, but I remember specifically talking to her and about how much that sculpture meant to her. And I thought to myself that one of the benefits of the Homeless Jesus is you can't see the face, and you can use your own imagination to put the face of Jesus that's in your heart. And I think that's a real added feature about the Homeless Jesus. In fact, I go as far as saying that the best portrait of Jesus I've ever done was the one that didn't have a face. And so it's always been an issue with me about how Jesus is represented and how Christian artwork is represented. When I was in St. Peter's Square, I was really, really happy when I was meeting some of the people for I was hanging around in Rome like 4 or 5 days afterwards, and I would see the many different people from all over the world coming to that sculpture. And what I thought was very interesting, actually a group of Sikhs, 7 Sikhs from London, England, came up to the sculpture. And I could point out not 1 Sikh, but 3 Sikhs in my sculpture. And they were just so excited and so happy. And I thought, and at that point in time, I thought, there's a welcome. And then there's an artistic welcome. And an artistic welcome, I think, is really powerful. And I thought, with this one sculpture here, I have suggested so much of a belonging and unity. And it's hard to do in a culture today. I think it's a struggle, and it's oftentimes not done. And so I think that the sculpture really does show that welcoming. If you go in, I oftentimes think if you go into a church, most of the artwork you see are Europeans, a representation of Jesus looking like a European. I don't have a problem with that, really, but I do think that there is also room for more diverse representations of Jesus, Mary, etc., worked in it. And I think that there's room for everything, including with my own work. So I just did, after I did for Cardinal Gregory, his African corpus, I just got the opportunity to do an African corpus for Tanzania, which was very exciting too. And what was interesting is the people that commissioned it suggested, and it was going straight to Tanzania, a huge Capuchin shrine that they're building there. And I was told that it's very difficult to find an African corpus that's traditional and realistic in Tanzania. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? I think that artwork is a bridge. Artwork, that's the hope, that it becomes a bridge. It becomes an open door, and it becomes something that invites one into learning more about the faith. However, if it's not done properly, the bridge can become a wall. And I think that I'm very sensitive of that in my artwork, about how to make it an invitation as opposed to something that defines or kind of I don't know what word I could use. It kind of identifies from us versus them idea. And I think that, so I'm always trying to do artwork, Christian artwork, that is kind of, its foundation is within the text, the Bible text, and to authentically represent our faith in a way that is compelling. And I think that also I'm just going on and on here, sorry. but I also think, I'm just going to say one more thing. I also think that that there has been in artwork a kind of a, over the last couple hundred years, overemphasis on the comfort part of Christianity being represented in artwork. And I think that as a Christian, as a Catholic, I believe that for me, it's half comfort and it's half challenge for me as a Christian. And I think that if one looks at Christ and what he asks of us to do, it's not all comfort. It's not all cookies and cream. It's not all easy. And I think about the Angels Unawares with what happened with the beheading of some innocent people in France, just like 2 days ago. It breaks my heart to hear that. And it breaks my heart that this is a refugee from Lampedusa. And I think that, and I looked at the Angels Unawares, or I thought about it in my mind about the Angels Unawares right after this event. And I thought, well, no one said that Christianity is something easy. No one said that it's cookies and cream. No one says that finding the sacred in everyone and loving your enemy is something that's easy. And so what I want to do with my artwork, in a sense, is represent that authentic Christianity, that it is a struggle. It is not just a warm blanket. It's also a slap. It's also a shock. And that's how the Gospels are. It's hard, it's haunting, but it's also comforting. And so to represent that authentic, pure idea of what Christianity is I think the only way that it's going to be relevant today.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Tim, for sharing. And I do think too, the authentic call, right, to action and to kind of see the truths of individuals' lives and their realities. Not only this week where was there the beheadings, but also a boat of migrants sank off of that was leaving from Sierra Leone to the Canary Islands that had 140 migrants and refugees on there. And I think your sculpture, Angels Unawares, also has 140 faces of individuals. And so the significance of that number, of that event, that moment, and your artwork and the way it draws people into the truth and the stories of those is very powerful, and something that clearly your faith is calling you to do this work, that you're inspired.
Don't tell me, did you just say that there was 140
people that,
are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, that's what the news, yeah, it's amazing to think that.
Oh my God.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the significance of the piece? There's such a depth to kind of the individuals, the numbers. What are some of those favorite parts of the Angels Unawares for you that stand out, or what was challenging about the creation of it?
I think that, well, I lived with the piece. I really did. And I would wake up 4 a.m, and for like 7 months, that was my life. And so the challenge of it was, I think the experience of migrants, and to balance it off, to have the horror, but also to have the hope, and to develop it in a way that it's coherent, it's unified, and the positioning of the people and what their expressions are were very important too. And then you have the mechanical aspect about making it believable, in a sense, making it work as far as a piece, as far as a design is concerned. One arm here, one bigger person here, heavy draped person here, then a relatively nude person over here. And so it became a composition. I think that's important too, because it has to look kind of nice. So I was very much concerned about just intuitively having it look good when you see it from a distance, when you're looking at it at a different angle. And that was important to me. I think one of the most haunting areas was here in Canada. when I was working on it, there was a big controversy about banning Muslim headdresses in our country, and the positioning of the Muslim at the front, where she is, I don't know what that's called, but she has her whole face covered except for a little slit there. What is that called?
Burqa.
That burqa. Yeah, the burqa. And I was thinking, oh, that's just happening in Quebec right now, where they're trying to ban that. That's pretty radical, to put a Muslim right at the front in such a prominent place. And I thought, what would Pope Francis want me to do? And I basically, that was my go-to thought process as I was working on it, in a sense. And I really did feel throughout the whole process that I was taking his compassion and his devotion towards the refugees, and I was always conscious of how he would want it represented. And yes, he would want the woman with the burqa right at the front, right? But that one was really fascinating for me, because if you look at her, she's right beside the Hasidic Jew, and who's right at the front, like in the center front, she is carrying a bag of possessions, and at one point, she was carrying it in this, it's clay like this piece over here. Well, all my sculptures are clay before they're cast in bronze, right? And she was carrying a baby, and the baby had their hand out. And I thought, and for months it was like that. And then I thought, this is too Walt Disney. This is just way too Walt Disney. And so I ripped off the baby, and I put some clumps of clay there, and I just made possessions. And I left the baby bottle in her hand. And I just thought, that's it. Where's the baby? And it just changed the whole mood of the piece. There is this haunting ambiguity about who she is, where she came from, and where her baby is. And that was kind of typical of the process that happened time and time again over the months of working on it, is looking at the figures and then subtly changing them. There's an African Holy Family kind of worked in one of the sides. It's just a beautiful composition. And I did want to show that love. And I had a lot of chances. In a sense, when you have more than 100 figures, you're bound to get it right. It's like the monkey at the typewriter. You have a lot of chances to do something great. But one of the also the things that Pope Francis, this is Pope Francis's sculpture. One of the other ways it is I remember, I think it was 3 Christmases ago, Pope Francis brought everyone's attention that Joseph, Mary, and Jesus were refugees. And then he mentioned, about no room at the inn, having to be at the stable and everything. I did weave Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus worked within the piece. And it's only because the sculpture is 20 feet, and it's only because there's more than 100 figures in it that I could do it so discreetly. Yeah, it was just like, some people see it, other people might not even see it. And that's exactly how I wanted it. It's a sculpture that allowed me to put a lot of discovery in on it, or to make it something that you can explore. And so it was really an amazing experience. And I like to think that throughout the project, it evolved, and it gave real dignity and representation to some people that, quite frankly, are never sculpted very much for a sculpture. And so I like that idea, right? And I thought that, to have this sculpture to be full of welcoming, and to have the figures all kind of work together with not only the different areas of the world, but also the historical periods of time, I think was very important too. That I think it's a piece that visually, when you come across it, you have to basically say, yeah, this is what people do. One of the fascinating points on it is, I was in Rome showing the progress of the piece to Cardinal Cherney, and at dinner time when we were sitting around with some people, and we were all going over all the different figures, and it really you can almost create a book with all the different figures in it, right? And I said, well, I guess I'm going to have everyone in here except the Native Americans. And Cardinal Cherney looked at me like I was an idiot. And he said, they were migrant people too. They just didn't go on a boat. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. I thought about the Cherokee with the Trail of Tears. They were displaced. They moved around so much. And so I came back to my studio, and at the back of the boat, I had a weeping Jew, but I already had three Jewish people in already. And the weeping figure was just perfect. So I transformed that figure into a Cherokee. And so the connection with the Trail of Tears and this Cherokee crying at the back of the boat is just stunning. And those are like some of the fun, awesome parts of the project, right? And it's also interesting that I have a Polish woman at the front of the boat who is pregnant. And if you look at my model, I did a 5-foot version of it that's in St. Paul's Basilica. She's at the back of the boat. And I think that to have the hope of new life right at the front of the boat it was a really cool thing. So there's a lot going on in the piece. And I think it's a piece that you can spend more than a couple minutes looking at it and benefit from what you see. But again, I think it's very discreet. I think that it had to be 20 feet to be so quiet of a message and so subtle. And the angel fits right within it, but it doesn't stand out. It doesn't smack you right in the face as soon as you see it. And that's intentional, right? Same with the Holy Family, the Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. It's represented in a way that you discover it in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing some of those kind of descriptors of the figures within. It helps when we're drawn to it and able to see it more tomorrow to go look at some of those details. I think Sheila, did you have a question, or Patricia?
Sure, I'll jump in. First, I want to say thank you, Tim. Timmy. It's a real pleasure to speak with you and to be in your studio, which looks amazing. I wanted to say, just tell you a little bit about my experience of encountering angels unaware today. I would not call it discreet, Tim. I would call it sensitive, but the amazing thing about the placement at Boston College is it's by far the largest piece of sculpture we've ever had at BC. And it's right in the pathway, in the most sort of visible middle part of campus. And so I think that the placement is brilliant, and you'd be very happy when you see it. And it really, there's no way to avoid it. You know, it really interrupts. And I think that's important when you were talking about, essentially bad art is comfortable art, right? It's sentimental, it's cliched. And one of the things that makes your piece very powerful is its scale and its size and the singularity of the lived experience so I had an incredibly wonderful time. And one thing it really needs to be talked about is, you're a master at texture. And one of the descriptors that I found so interesting in the signifiers were all the different bags that people were carrying. The plastic bags, the leather bags, and you were mixing up these times, right? Of a little girl with a plastic, it looked like a plastic Mickey Mouse luggage.
Yeah.
And so that it really asks the viewer to look carefully and to spend time and imagine these individual stories. My question is sort of a techie question. I had a couple of techie questions. One was just as an artist, what's the like in your studio right now, what's the, I'm interested in what the armature, that's a lot of clay. What's the armature underneath? But then in a less techy, but still techy, I wanted to know if you could speak a little bit about the scale of the sculpture, because it's described as life size, but it's actually just under life size, a lot of the figures. And I was wondering if that was deliberate in terms of, we have a bodily relationship with these individuals, but because they're slightly smaller, does that make them more vulnerable? Was that a decision on your part to make us want to, as an act of empathy, for us to want to take care of them on some level? Are they more vulnerable by being slightly smaller? And was that intentional?
Well, thank you. And yeah, the clay that I created, yeah, it's a lot of clay, like it is in this piece here. And it weighs, like if you have a figure sculpted in clay, I think it's like twice as heavy or 3 times as heavy as an actual person. So I had to get, for that piece, I had to make sure the engineers were in to make sure that everything was safe on it. But it's solid clay, and it's like building a card house, actually. What I don't like doing is putting in a lot of armature, because then you'll run into, it kind of prevents you from actually changing things around. This piece here that I'm working on, it's basically solid clay, except for, I have some logs in there, but I will remove them up. See that? Oh, that upsets me. That pisses me off. That's like wood in there. And so I don't know necessarily, there's another part of wood. That's wood there, right? So I don't necessarily know how the composition happens till I'm in the middle of the battle, so to speak, right? And that's why this model here, if you can see, it's really simple. It's just kind of like the idea. And then I would stop working that as soon as, okay, now I'm wasting time. I got it. So let's just move on to the big one. And you can see that it's a lot has changed from the original model, and it still, it still does change. And it's still like, even now I am totally reworking areas. And so it's basically a big mass of clay. But what happens to the clay is it gets hard. It gets really hard. It's like wood now, right? And so it gets really hard, and then it gets its own structure, right? Like that's, I don't know. If you touched it, you would think you're touching wood, right? Damp wood. And so that means I can change things, and it's kind of self-supportive. And then, like, for instance, that hand was wet. Now it's rock hard. I can pull out the hand, and I can take it and work more detail, and then put it back. You see the wire? Yes, I have a very simple wire in that, but St. Paquita is basically solid clay except for a wire. And these figures are solid, and I can change things. I'll change an arm, a leg, even I'll remove a whole person. And sometimes some of the people actually just fall off and then I have to redo them. But when you take it all into consideration, I'm still ahead of the game as opposed to doing very tight armatures. I really was not really concerned about the scale of the piece, nor am I on this. I'm just doing what feels good as I'm sculpting it. And so I'm just with the Angels Unawares, they're not, I think they're not really life size. They're a little bit smaller, but I think it kind of works because they're on a boat and then they look a little bit smaller, which I think kind of brings the idea that they're more further away. There's kind of that use of kind of perspective on it in a sense. And so perhaps it looks a little bit bigger because they're a little bit smaller or they're taller, so the perspective is a little bit different. But no, I'm just sculpting how I see it and how I work with it. A lot of the figures there on the Angels Unawares, I used principally a male model and a female model. Those are my go-to models to get some of the structure down. And then what I would do is I would then change it. But I usually have models and that work for the anatomy, and then I change it afterwards, right? But it's hard, like even the Angels Unawares, because it's relief, it's almost impossible to get it anatomically correct. And so I like to consider that anatomy is just a tool that you can pick up and use, or you don't have to use it, right? So I don't know, like you could look at this piece now and, oh, look at that bone there, or look at that, I don't care, like really. This is, well, I do. Okay, you got me, I really care. But this, on the weekend, I'm working on this African, he's a laborer, a miner, and I'm working on that leg. I kid you not, I must have spent 3 hours working on that leg. And it's never going to look exactly right, but it's art, right? It's all pressed in. These aren't figures that are three-dimensional, so you can't really turn them around. They have to work within the composition. Like the Angels Unawares, I was concerned with having the composition work and having kind of a texture, working with a quiet space or a simple space, and then something more dramatic, just like I am with this piece here. I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Patricia.
Yes, passing by the sculpture today, and of course, being extremely aware that Election Day is tomorrow, I was very struck by the timeliness of it arriving on our campus, because certainly this is a very contentious period in our country, and especially it's been towards refugees over the past 4 years. Not that it hasn't been before, but obviously especially so. And I was very much struck by the fact that your figures have not only people who look like people who are fleeing violence in the world today or poverty, but also people from different time periods, people who could be my relatives coming over from Germany or Ireland in the past. And I wondered if you speak of your sculpture as Christian, do you also see it as political?
I really don't think of it as political. I think of it as I hope that basically I'm a Christian before I'm anything else, and I hope that that's the way the sculptures are taken.
Yeah.
And I do think that I think one of the powerful things about the piece is that you can see an African or a Syrian right beside a European, and that I was very conscious that that was my audience, and it really doesn't matter if you know, I was just sensitive of it. I didn't really change it. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to make this for Europeans to look at, but I was aware of that. And I was very conscious of the fact that when you see your ancestors in that right beside a Syrian, it's kind of hard to criticize what's their plight, because our ancestors were basically in the same situation. And what's fascinating is most of the Europeans, like my ancestors, came from Germany to New York, and then they came up to Canada in 1830. And I can guarantee you, they were basically everything but name refugees. Right? And most of our Europeans that settled this area were refugees, but for the name. They didn't have anything. They were escaping horrible crap going on in Europe, and they're hoping for a better life. So to put them together and to have that tapestry made of modern as well as historic, I think is powerful. And it's like, you can say that, you can say, you know, we all came from some other place, but to see it, I think, is something else. And I think that's the power of artwork. I think artwork has that power to crystallize something and to make people aware of it. And that's what I hope that the sculpture will do. It's like, one of my favorite quotes is from Oscar Wilde. He was talking about art in his essay Decay of Line, and he said that the people in London didn't see the fog till the painters started painting it. And I thought that is the beauty and the power of artwork. And it's also like, you think about a famous person. Oftentimes they do sculptures of famous people, and you think you can have so many honorary degrees, but if they're going to put a sculpture of you in a park, that's probably the best thing. And that, I think, in our society is this auspicious compliment that we reserve only for a select few. And so to have these refugees, these marginalized people that are elevated to that point by a bronze sculpture, I think is symbolic on its own. Just the fact that that's done, right? And so, but also I think that the idea will crystallize what oftentimes people talk about. It's there in bronze now, the idea that, you know, we all came from some other place, right? And I was also very conscious about what Michael Cherney said. And yes, it was him that suggested the Cherokee, because he sees that, and a very sensitive person. And he sees that, and I hope that other people can see that too. I'm talking about the whole sculpture, you know, that sensitivity about the desire for an actual sculpture being made. Oftentimes there's no sculpture being made of these people, and so to give them that credibility and that awareness and that solid visual icon, I think, is very important. You look at the Statue of Liberty too, and I think oftentimes as I worked on this, I thought this is kind of like a Statue of Liberty for today. I think that you can, it has real grounded faces. It has real, you know, the Statue of Liberty, it's a Greek goddess. You know, it was done in the 18th, the late 1800s, or the turn of the century. I think it was 1895 it was installed. But it was a different time set. But I think now artwork also has to work harder for people's attention. If I did some symbol, some very simple symbol, like say, I'll use a Greek goddess to symbolize the refugees, it wouldn't work. People, you got to work harder as an artist to grab people's attention. And I think that with these real grounded faces, and I made sure that every single face on the piece was identifiable to me as a person as I was working. I wanted to know who those people were as much as I can when I represented them. But if I couldn't get their story, which was quite a bit of them, at least I got a very authentic photograph that I found. And I wanted to keep with that. The only there's only one figure. I think there's only one person that's sitting on the boat on the back. He's basically a nude figure with his hand out. I kind of made up that figure as kind of the universal refugee, but all the rest had actual faces that I could connect to either a person that I knew of, that like a couple of refugees that were in my studio, or an actual photograph. And I wanted that for my experience, because if I had a real experience, it would heighten the power of the sculpture, and hopefully that would carry on to the viewer, that they would be seeing something that was actually kind of real. But an interesting point on the sculptures, the Polish girl at the front was my model. Remember I told you I used one male and one female model? Well, my model was pregnant. I kid you not, she was very pregnant. And then she took some time off, had the baby, and the baby Jesus is that baby. Isn't
Oh,
that cool?
very cool. That's very.
But yeah, so and actually her husband is from Morocco, and he's trying to get into Canada, and so just really interesting that that that's the story of my model as I'm working on this migration sculpture here, right? But yeah,
And I
I
think,
hope.
no, it's this is so fascinating. And Sheila and Patricia, I mean, just thinking about the medium of your own artwork, could you maybe share with us ways that you feel like you've addressed social injustices through theater, through your artwork, or maybe encouraging your student voices in ways? And because I think that's such a important opportunity that you have in working with young, talented, emerging artists, and really trying to encourage them to, use their artwork for good. You want to share a little bit about your work here?
Go first, Sheila.
No, I was going to say you go first, Patricia, because you just put on a play, didn't you? That directly addresses some of these.
And let me see if I can. Oh, here I go. I'm going to change my background here. Here's my cast, or part of them. My medium, or my job in my medium, is very different than yours, Tim or Sheila, in that I very much see myself as a conduit between the playwright and the actors and the audience. And I look for stories that are relevant for now. That's very important to me, that they resonate in our community today. And Sweat is a play by Lynn Nottage where she studied people in Reading, Pennsylvania between 2000 and 2008, and the loss of jobs in the Rust Belt and how it affected racial relations, the poverty that ensued, the drug addiction, the alcoholism, the violence. And sadly, it was so relevant this year when I picked it because of COVID, and looking at job losses once again, and looking at the tensions in our country right now because of those losses and where we're at. So this is just some of the cast, because some of them we zoomed in from other states. We had a student in Texas, a student in Atlanta, and another student who was out in Weston, Massachusetts, but didn't want to come in. And the plays have to have resonance for me and for the community I'm serving. And I think especially, I'm just going to read you the last two lines of the play, which are said by a young man who's just spent 8 years in prison and has returned to the bar, where he, through an act of violence, has severely brain damaged another human being, who's now, instead of working as a bartender, working cleaning the tables. And Jason, the young man, says, "It's nice that you take care of him." And the bartender that's there now says, "That's how it ought to be." And those sentences, "It's nice that you take care of him, that's how it ought to be," just resonated with me so much for the time we're in, where it just seems like we've forgotten to take care of people, that people who have less than we do, people who are struggling, and that, yes, that is what we ought to do. Absolutely. And so that message very much resonated for me in this play. And the play really drives towards that ending. We don't know where we're going. It's a mystery for part of the play. The fight and the injury doesn't happen until the second to the last scene. And before we've just watched the struggles of these people. And of course, I'm very fortunate to have the support I have in my department. to select plays that I feel have resonance. And I'm very lucky that I have students like these and the other students in the play who are willing to go the limit to portray sometimes some very unpleasant people so that we get the story of, you know, what happens to humanity when everything is ripped out from them. They lose their homes, they lose their job, they lose their life's meaning. And what does that do to a human being? And I have profoundly brave students who are willing to explore that with me and bring such stories to life. So I like having them here. Hi, guys. So yeah, I mean, and that's what I do. I've done a lot of plays about immigration. The last play I did, Invisible, was about migrants coming into England and their struggles in London. And we had a number of people who were refugees who came to see that play and came up to me afterwards and said, oh, the writing is so accurate. It's a play by a woman named Tena Stivovic, who's actually from Croatia, and went through the war there with her family. So it's she now lives in England, but well, now in Scotland. But, you know, this was very much a part of her existence. What happens to such people and what war does to people, and then what it means to be a refugee. And so, yeah, I mean, in my work, I'm searching for other people's work and then bringing it to the Boston College community.
So good. Yeah. Sheila, how about for you?
Well, there's sort of my work as an artist, and then there's my work as an educator. And sometimes they come together and sometimes they are different in terms of specific projects. But it's always grounded in this deep belief that in terms of social justice, no painting has ever stopped a bullet. The poet Seamus Heaney said, no poem has ever stopped a tank, but that art's great role is as witness, and that it humanizes humanity. And a lot of what we do in my issues and approaches to contemporary art class is look at that as the role of artist as witness, and art's role in humanizing humanity. So every year I keep, there's certain things I teach, but I always keep a section of the curriculum open for artists where a module called Artist as Activist, where, and I don't decide it ahead of time. I have people, we really respond on the ground to whatever's happening. And so 2 years or 3 years ago, we, after the massacres and the violence that happened in Charlottesville around the Robert E. Lee Monument, one project that we had was for students to do interventions upon the Confederate monument. Were there options besides, and some students wanted to take it down, as many people do, and put it in some people wanted to bomb it, some wanted to put it into a Confederate statue museum. Other people performed other kinds of projection interventions on it. So we respond on the ground I don't tell them what to think or how to respond, but we many times we bear witness to to what's most important to the students at that time. Last year, when we had the climate march in Boston, we worked a lot with the group called Extinction Rebellion, who has a very, very strong and beautiful graphic presence. And students responded to the environmental crisis. Really, that's very big in our students' eyes right now, environmental or ecological justice being, just so essential for human and planetary survival. And so how do we get that, message out? And then in my own, and it's been fantastic working with our students are so passionate. The challenge is to get everybody to slow down enough. I was thinking of when we're talking something that Tim said, or after the Oscar Wilde quote. I work sometimes, or I'm friends with a Benedictine monk who wrote a beautiful book called Anchoring the Altar about Christianity and art, which I highly recommend to this audience. And in it, he talks about art not being so much as, it's not invention, but it's revelation, right? It's about showing what is right before our eyes. And so in our incredibly driven, fast, competitive culture, that's a lot of what I try to do in the classroom, is actually just give people the opportunity to open their eyes, to rest, to be attentive and reflective enough to give themselves time to look and to respond creatively.
Tim, I'd love to come back to you, because the piece that you're working behind, I feel like, is drawing on both what Patricia and Sheila have been talking about, like art as activism and kind of a responsiveness. And so do you want to share a bit around the human trafficking piece and the significance of this and where it may be placed? Because I think that's really timely to this conversation as well.
Perfect example of art is a form of helping a social issue, I think. Actually, after the Angels Unaware sculpture that I created, I was requested to work on the theme of human trafficking, which is very close to Pope Francis's heart, to actually end human trafficking. And so, it's interesting because I didn't know very much about human trafficking, and then I started to learn about it, and I was totally crushed by it. I really did not think it existed. And in 2 seconds, anyone can get into this Kafkaesque reality that is right omnipresent within the world. And I was actually, initially I started to work on a model that was very simple compared to what this project is. The idea changed when I said to my mind, after doing a lot of research, they're sucking our children underground. And the imagery came from the Pied Piper of Hamelin, a poem where the Pied Piper is not paid for removing the rats from the town. So he threatens, and he does open up the ground, and he plays a different tune with his pipe, and the children dance through this hole into the earth and are never seen again. And I thought, this is the Pied Piper. This is what's happening to our children in our society here. And then the idea came for Saint Bakita, the hero, to be opening up the ground and letting the oppressed go free, which is the title of the piece. The figures of human trafficking are let out of this sewer great ground, and they're free. And it's a really dramatic piece. And I think, like, again, what I said is that artwork has to have power nowadays, or it's not going to be seen. We're competing with too much. We're competing with, so much different visual media. So the idea here, the idea here is, I don't know, can you see that?
Yeah.
Saint Bakita, who is the hero, who is opening up the ground and the oppressed are going free. Oh God, sorry about this. I can't see what you're seeing, but
Yeah,
you can see here, this is a figure, organ trafficked person. And then you can come across here and you see a child bride.
Mm.
And as I was working on this, I was well aware that this is probably the only time a child bride and an organ trafficked person has ever been represented in artwork. So I better do a good job. Here's a child laborer. And so what I wanted to do was to create these figures, sex trafficked woman. I think she's from Thailand, with those are Thai baht in her hand. This is a minor, child soldier. And it's representing people that are hardly ever tattoos. I'm sculpting a tattoo. The sex trafficked girls are usually branded with tattoos. I'm creating a piece that is literally having Saint Bakita let the oppressed go free. When I brought it over to the Vatican to show Sister Gabriel how it's going, she said, you have to put a baby in because babies are being sold on the black market. It just breaks my heart. And talking about a weapon, this is a weapon. This is a 20-foot weapon to make people aware. After I started doing the project, at night I was still reading up on human trafficking, and I read this fascinating quotation from Pope Francis. He said that human trafficking will always exist if it's kept underground. And I thought, okay, my sculpture has a function here.
Yeah, no, I thought about that today when I was going by the Angels Unawares, that it's the exact opposite of out of sight, out of mind, that your work is in sight and therefore in mind. And that's its role in many ways is that making visible in this way that's so physical and that we have to relate to on a bodily level. And that's where power lies.
Yeah, and I think that's what artwork can do, and I think that artwork brings out things in a way that is very special. And I have hope that artwork can, in a sense, stop bullets. I have that hope. I have that kind of that platonic idea that those perfect masterpieces are up there. And it's just us artists' hard work to pull them down to this world so people can experience them and be moved by them. And I do believe that. And I do believe that that art, and I do have the hope that artwork can persuade people and move people to truth. And it's like I don't know why I was thinking about Thomas Merton's Seven Story Mountain. This one part in the book where he's talking about his experience in Cuba, and he mentioned that, oh, Cuba is so great, and he talks about it, all these little details, and then he says, and also there's so many homeless people there. There's always an opportunity to practice charity. And I thought, oh my goodness, he is magnificent. To think of homeless people as a blessing because he can give them money. and I think that what we have to do as artists is actually create artwork that shows those eternal truths and presents them and puts them in your daily life. And I think artwork really has that power to do that. And so you have these constant reminders of the idea that human life is sacred. And it's interesting because the homeless Jesus right now it's installed in many different places, and I hope it gets installed in more, because really us in our broken nature, We need reminders all the time of
Yeah.
those eternal truths. And I oftentimes think about artwork as like very similar to a homily that a priest would give on a Sunday. And I think um, like I've read the Bible plenty of times, and I often think that most people that attend church, well, don't they get it? Why are they going? Like, just read the book once and digest it, understand it, and just that's it. Go on to other novels and things like that. But it's our broken nature, I think, our dumb ass humanity that forgets all this stuff all the time, that needs that constant uh, uh, repetition of it in our lives. So we stay on a relatively straight path. And I think that artwork really has the power to do that, is to bring more of it out, show our responsibilities as humans to our brothers and sisters, show the eternal truths, and do it a lot, not just once, but all the time in many different ways. And I think that like we have theater, we have visual artwork, and it's almost like I think like a gem that you turn it and you can see the different reflections and the different qualities of that diamond or gem or something like that. And I think that's what art does. It takes an idea and it turns it slowly so we can really fully understand it. So, and I do believe that those beautiful masterpieces are yet to be born and need to be pulled down by us artists. And I do believe that.
Do you know the
and
work
they're
of, sorry to interrupt, do you know the work of Doris Salcedo, a very important Colombian artist who works a lot around issues of mourning and memorial? I'd recommend anybody who's watching this show to look at her work. But sort of to piggyback on what you were saying, she talks about creative arts sort of opening up the possibility of the impossible, which is what you're making the impossible possible, and that that good art, it exceeds stable knowledge, right? Bad art gives all the answers in advance. And in that way, I think that's where there's the perfect tie-in with Christianity, which also exceeds stable knowledge, right? That's the mystery in relationship to the action. That's.
And this beauty is that, reading scripture, you're always transformed, or you're different at a different point. So you can continue to reread that Bible or the scriptures, or, you can always look at a piece of artwork differently too. Every time you go out, you see something new or see it from that different light.
If it's good artwork. Bad artwork, you get it all at once the first time.
Right. It's very true. Well, this has been an incredible conversation, and incredibly grateful for Timothy, Sheila, and Patricia for your inspiration this evening, and just sharing your own stories, your work with us, and just to continue to challenge us to think about ways that we can, utilize our talents and our gifts, if it's a different medium of artwork, or if it's our voice, or if it's kind of the acting, whatever it might be, to really help to transform society and work towards greater justice and equity for those, especially those that don't have a voice, that are often silenced in our world. And so just want to thank you very, very much for your time this evening, and for the work that you do, and just encourage everybody that's on to continue to go back to Angels Unawares while it's here at Boston College for the month of November, to walk past and gaze and bring a friend with you, bring somebody who hasn't seen it, and also to join us for one of the many other lectures or events that are happening on campus. The next one up is on Thursday. Father Alejandro will be talking about El Encuentro de Dios en la Frontera, so encountering God at the border. This one will be in Spanish, so please, you're welcome to join us. That'll be in the evening, and then we have many others. So definitely check out the Roach Center website that has all the listing of events for this month only, because after After Boston, it's headed elsewhere. So you're just gonna have to follow this statue across the country, which would be great. But thank you so much, Tim, Sheila, and Patricia for your time this evening and for sharing all your knowledge. We truly are left inspired, and we will look forward to seeing everybody on Thursday night, hopefully. So
No, and thank you for bringing it here
Yes.
too. You know, it's
Tim, for being so open.
fantastic, and it's a
Video.
huge feat. And I love this idea of sort of art couch surfing or art campus surfing. And I hope it's just the first time that we keep on having gigantic sculptures coming through our campus.
yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
thank you. God bless. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
For more Catholic faith resources, follow us at bc.edu/C21 or via Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.